Hey guys! Imagine this. It's a chill Saturday night, my dad's had a few beers, and suddenly he's spilling his soul, except he thinks I'm someone else. What starts as a hilarious mix-up turns into a wild ride I never saw coming. And just when I think it's over, boom! A creepy photo lands in my mailbox. Who's watching? Stick around to find out. Hey, before we jump into this tale, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and hit that subscribe button. Ready? Let's roll! I was sprawled out on my bed, scrolling through my phone, when the sound of my parents' laughter floated up from the living room. It was a typical Saturday night in our little suburban house just outside Philly. My dad, Tom, was 54, a big guy with a knack for fixing cars and telling loud stories. My mom, Linda, 51, had this soft voice that somehow balanced him out. They'd cracked open a couple of beers, like they always did on weekends, and were cracking up over some old memory. I could picture them on the couch, Tom with his feet up, Linda curled up beside him, the TV humming in the background. It was their thing, a ritual that made our modest home feel alive. But that night, something felt off. Maybe it was the way Tom's voice carried a little louder, or how Linda called it quits earlier than usual, leaving him solo downstairs. Either way, I didn't think much of it, until I heard his heavy footsteps stomping down the hall. I just switched to a random video about restoring old furniture, something to drown out the noise, when my bedroom door creaked open. I glanced up, expecting Mom checking if I was still awake. Nope. It was Tom, swaying a little, his eyes glassy from the beer. He squinted at me in the dim light and said, "Linda, you still up?" My heart did a weird flip. He thought I was Mom. I'm Kate, 25, still crashing with my folks while I figure out my next move. I could have corrected him right there. Should have, probably. But instead, I froze. His mistake was so ridiculous it almost felt like a prank. And then, out of nowhere, this wild idea hit me. What if I played along? Just for a minute, just to see what he'd do. Yeah, I'm here, I said, pitching my voice soft like Mom's. He shuffled closer, plopping down on the edge of my bed with a groan. "Long day," he muttered, rubbing his face. I nodded, biting back a laugh. This was nuts. I mean, I'd seen him tipsy plenty of times. Saturday nights were practically a live comedy show in our house. But this? This was next level. Part of me wanted to shake him and yell, "Yo, Dad, it's me!" But another part, the curious part, wondered what he'd say if he thought I was Linda. It wasn't about tricking him, not really. It was more like a chance to peek behind the curtain of who he was when he wasn't just Dad. See, Tom's always been this steady guy. Works construction, comes home dusty, tinkers with engines in the garage. But after a few drinks, he turns into this chatty, almost goofy version of himself. Linda loves it. She says it's like dating the college kid she fell for 30 years ago. Me? I usually just roll my eyes and scroll faster. But that night, with him sitting there, mistaking me for her, I felt this pull to dig deeper. What made him tick? What was he like when he wasn't barking orders or fixing stuff? So I kept going. "Rough week at work?" I asked, still channeling Mom's vibe. "Yeah, the crew's been a mess," he said, leaning back against my headboard like it was the most natural thing in the world. "New guy dropped a beam. Chai dian erza liao wo." I blinked. He'd slipped into some old habit, tossing in a random phrase he'd picked up from a buddy years ago. It was so him, random, loud, human. I smirked, tucking my phone under my pillow. "Sounds intense," I said, keeping it vague. He nodded, eyes half closed. "You always get it, Linda." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just funny, it was weirdly fascinating. Here was this guy I'd known my whole life, spilling his guts, totally clueless. I could have ended it right there, flicked on the light, and watched him stumble out with a red face. But I didn't. I wanted to see where this went. Not in some creepy way, gross, no, just what would he say next? What would I learn? "You deserve a break," I said, testing the waters. He chuckled, a low rumble. "With you around, I might actually take one." Okay, that threw me. It was sweet, but it also made my stomach twist. He wasn't talking to me, he was talking to Mom, or who he thought was Mom. I shifted a little, keeping my distance, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was like I'd stumbled into a live podcast of my parents' marriage. Part of me felt guilty. Should I really be doing this? Isn't it kind of messed up to let him ramble on? But then I thought, nah, it's harmless. He's just venting. I'm just listening. No big deal, right? Except it kinda was. The longer he sat there, the more I noticed stuff I'd never paid attention to, like how his shoulders slumped when he talked about work, or how his voice softened when he mentioned Mom. "You're the best part of my day," he said, and I swear my heart skipped. Not because it was about me, it wasn't, but because I'd never heard him say anything like that sober. I always figured he was too tough for mushy stuff. Guess I was wrong. Then the footsteps stopped making sense. He kicked off his boots, thud, thud, and stretched out like he owned the place. "Gonna crash here," he mumbled. My jaw dropped. "Crash here? In my room? Oh, hell no!" But before I could figure out how to nudge him back to reality, he reached out, fumbling for my hand. I yanked it back, laughing nervously under my breath. You good?" I said, still playing the Linda card. He grinned, eyes shut. "Better now." That's when the real panic kicked in. This was spiraling fast. I wasn't just eavesdropping on his thoughts anymore. I was in the middle of something I hadn't signed up for. My pulse hammered in my ears. What if he stayed? What if Mom walked in? I needed an exit strategy, stat. But even as I plotted, part of me couldn't shake this rush. Like I was a detective cracking a case I didn't know existed. Who was this guy really? And why was I so hooked on finding out? So yeah, that's how it started. One dumb mistake, one split-second choice, and suddenly I was neck-deep in a night that'd flip everything I thought I knew about my family. Looking back, I wonder if I should have just laughed it off and sent him packing. But where's the fun in that? Sometimes you gotta roll with the weird to figure out what's real. And trust me, it only got weirder from there. Tom was already sprawled out on my bed, one arm flopped over the edge, the other brushing the pillow next to me. I scooted back, keeping my cool, but my brain was screaming. How did we get here? "Yeah, I'm here, hun," I said, mimicking Mom's soft tone again. My voice wobbled a little, but he didn't catch it. He just sighed, sinking deeper into the mattress like he'd found his safe spot. "Work's been kicking my ass," he grumbled, his words slurring just enough to make me smirk. I nodded, playing along. "Sounds rough. What happened?" He launched into it, something about a rookie on the crew screwing up a concrete pour, nearly costing him a day's progress. I propped myself up on one elbow, listening close. This wasn't just funny anymore. It was like I'd cracked open a window into his world. He kept going, his voice low and gravelly. "Guy didn't even check the mix, whole slab's gotta be redone." I could hear the frustration, the kind he usually buried under a grunt and a beer. "That's brutal," I said, still channeling Mom. "You've been carrying a lot, huh?" He nodded, eyes half shut. "Yeah, but you get it, Linda. Always do." My stomach did a little flip. He was so convinced I was her, and I was riding this weird high, part guilt, part thrill. I mean, I'd seen him vent before, but never like this. Never so raw. I shifted a bit, making sure our shoulders didn't touch. "You need a break, Tom," I said, testing how far I could push it. "Break? Huh, maybe a weekend at the lake," he muttered, cracking a tired grin. "You, me, some fishing. Remember that time we almost tipped the boat?" I froze. I didn't know that story. Mom did. I faked a laugh, quick and light. "Yeah, good times." He chuckled, and I relaxed a little. This was wild. I was pulling it off. But then he reached out, his hand fumbling toward mine. I jerked back fast, heart pounding. "Whoa, you okay?" I said, keeping it breezy. He mumbled something about being beat and dropped his hand, clueless. I let out a silent breath. Close call. Still, I couldn't stop. It was like I'd stumbled into a game I didn't know the rules to, but I was winning. "Tell me more about work," I said, nudging him back to safe ground. He perked up a little. "Boss is riding me hard, says we're behind schedule." I'm like, "Man, give me a crew that listens and I'll build you a damn skyscraper." I grinned. That was Tom, gruff, proud, always ready to prove himself. I'd heard him brag about jobs before, but this felt different, like he was letting loose in a way he never did with me, Kate, the daughter who just nodded and scrolled through her phone. "You're good at what you do," I said, softening my voice. He turned his head toward me, eyes still mostly closed. You think so? There was this tiny crack in his tone, like he actually needed to hear it. My chest tightened. Did he doubt himself that much? Yeah, I know so, I said, and it wasn't even a lie. He smiled, small and real. You're the best, Linda. I swallowed hard. This was getting too deep, too fast. I should have tapped out, flipped the light on, laughed it off, sent him stumbling to Mom's room. But I didn't. I was hooked. Then he said it. You're different tonight. His voice dropped, husky and slow, like he was really seeing her. Well, me. My pulse spiked. Different how? I asked, playing it cool, but gripping the blanket tight. He shrugged, barely awake. Dunno, just softer, nicer. I forced a laugh. Maybe you're just tired. He nodded, mumbling, maybe. But the air shifted. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was like I'd crossed some invisible line. I could feel his warmth next to me, hear his breathing slow down, and suddenly I wasn't sure who was steering this thing. I scooted back a little more, keeping my distance but not bailing yet. You've been tense, huh? I said, fishing for something to say. He grunted. Yeah, shoulders are killing me. Need a vacation, not a nap. I smirked. Well, you're halfway there, crashing here. He laughed, a real deep laugh that echoed in my tiny room. Guess so. For a second it felt normal, like we were just two people chilling. But then reality snapped back. He thought I was Mom. This wasn't normal. It was nuts. Part of me wanted to keep digging, ask him stuff I'd never dare as Kate. Like, was he happy? Did he miss the old days? But another part was yelling at me to shut it down. What was I even doing? This wasn't some heart-to-heart with my dad. It was me pretending to be someone else, soaking up his unguarded side. It hit me hard. I was seeing a Tom I didn't know. Not the guy who barked at me to mow the lawn, but the one who carried stress he never showed. It was cool, but it was also messing with my head. You deserve better than this grind, I said, almost to myself. He turned toward me, eyes cracking open a sliver. With you here, it's enough. My breath caught. That wasn't for me. It was for Linda. But damn, it landed heavy. I felt this weird mix of pride and panic. Pride because I'd pulled this off. Panic because I didn't know how to stop. Glad I can help, I said, voice tight. He murmured something I didn't catch and settled deeper into the bed. That's when I knew I'd lost the reins. This wasn't just funny or curious anymore. It was intense. My heart was hammering, and every word felt like it could tip us somewhere I didn't want to go. I needed to pull the plug, but I couldn't. Not yet. I was too caught up, too tangled in this weird electric moment. What started as a dumb joke was turning into something I couldn't predict, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. Tom shifted closer, his shoulder brushing the edge of my pillow, and I could feel the heat rolling off him. My heart was pounding so loud I swore he'd hear it. Tom, I whispered, barely getting the word out, still stuck in Mom's soft tone. He grinned, eyes still shut, and dropped his hand on my shoulder. Light, casual, but it hit me like a jolt. You're the best, Linda, he mumbled, his voice thick with that sleepy, beer-fueled warmth. I could have bolted right then, should have, but my hand moved before my brain caught up, grazing his fingers. It wasn't planned, just this dumb reflex, and the second I did it, the room felt heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. He didn't pull back. Instead, he squeezed my shoulder a little, like it was the most natural thing. Been a while since we just hung out like this, he said, slurring a bit. My stomach flipped. Hung out? He thought this was some cozy moment with Mom, not his daughter playing a weird game. I forced a smile he couldn't see. Yeah, it's nice, I said, keeping it vague. But inside I was spinning. This wasn't funny anymore. It was intense, and I didn't know how to hit the brakes. His breathing slowed, steady, and I thought maybe he'd doze off and I'd be off the hook. Nope. He slid closer, his arm settling along the blanket, inches from me. I froze, gripping the edge of my sheet. What was I doing? This had started as a laugh, me messing with him, seeing how far he'd go, but now it felt like I'd tripped into something way bigger. You okay, hun? I asked, pitching my voice sweet to keep the Linda act alive. He chuckled, low and rough. Better with you here. My chest tightened. That was sweet, too sweet, and it wasn't even for me. I shifted back, just enough to keep some space, but my mind was racing. Could I stop this? Should I? Part of me wanted to yell, "It's Kate, you goof!" and watch him freak out. But another part, the nosy, reckless part, was hooked. Then he moved again, his hand sliding down my arm, slow and easy. It wasn't pushy, just this lazy, tired gesture, but it sent my pulse through the roof. "Tom," I said again, sharper this time, testing the waters. He opened one eye, barely, and grinned. "What's up, babe?" Babe. He called Mom that all the time, and now it was aimed at me. I laughed, a quick, nervous burst, and pulled my arm back. "Just checking on you," I said, scrambling to keep it light. He nodded, settling back. "You're too good to me." That's when it hit me. I was losing it. This wasn't a game I could win anymore. It was a tightrope, and I was wobbling hard. My hand hovered over the lamp switch. One flick, and this'd be over. But before I could decide, the sharp trill of Mom's ringtone cut through the silence. Some cheesy pop song she loved. It was coming from her room down the hall. Tom flinched, his eyes popping open. He blinked, squinting at me in the dim light, and I saw it click. "Kate?" he croaked, his voice cracking like he'd just woken up from a bad dream. I smirked, caught red-handed but trying to play it cool. "Hey, Dad." His face went ghost white and he yanked his hand back like I'd burned him. "What the—" He bolted upright, nearly tipping off the bed, and stared at me like I'd grown two heads. "Oh man, I thought you were Linda." His voice was a mix of panic and pure shock. I couldn't help it. I laughed, loud and real, the tension snapping like a rubber band. "Yeah, you kinda did," I said, sitting up too. He ran a hand through his hair, wild-eyed. "How long? Why didn't you say something?" He was scrambling now, boots still on the floor, one sock half off. I shrugged, grinning. "It was funny. You were so out of it." He groaned, dropping his face into his hands. "Oh, this is bad. This is so bad." I rolled my eyes. "Relax. It's fine. You just took a wrong turn." He peeked at me through his fingers, still horrified. "You let me ramble like that?" "Yep," I said, popping up. "You're chatty after a few beers." He groaned again, louder, and swung his legs off the bed. "I'm an idiot. Linda's gonna kill me." I snorted. "She won't know unless you tell her." He shot me a look, half glare, half plea. "You're not telling her, right?" I held up my hands. "My lips are sealed." He stumbled to his feet, swaying a little, and grabbed the doorframe for balance. "I need to—" "Yeah, I'm out of here," he muttered, then bolted, slamming the door behind him. The room went quiet. Just me and the echo of that ringtone fading out. I flopped back on my pillow, heart still racing, and stared at the ceiling. What just happened? I'd pushed it too far, way too far. But man, it was a rush. Tom's face when he realized? Priceless. I couldn't stop grinning, even as my brain caught up and started asking the big questions. Was it wrong to let it go that long? Probably. I mean, I could have stopped him 5 minutes in, saved us both the awkwardness. But I didn't because, well, it was like cracking open a book I'd never read. Tom wasn't just Dad in that moment. He was this guy with worries, quirks, a whole side I'd never seen. It wasn't about fooling him. It was about seeing him. Still, I knew I'd dodged a bullet. If Mom had walked in, yikes, game over. I pulled the blanket up, replaying it all. That moment when he grabbed my arm. Innocent, sure, but it flipped a switch. Not in a creepy way, just real. Too real. I'd peeked behind the curtain, and now I couldn't unsee it. Tom wasn't mad, just mortified, and I wasn't scarred, just wired. But one thing was clear. We'd never talk about this again. Not unless I wanted to watch him squirm for the rest of his life. And honestly, that might be kind of fun. Tom's door slam still echoed in my head as I sat there, staring at the ceiling, my heart finally slowing down. It was Sunday morning now, and the smell of coffee and sizzling bacon drifted up from the kitchen. I dragged myself out of bed, threw on a hoodie, and headed downstairs. Mom was at the stove, humming some old tune, flipping strips of bacon like nothing happened. Tom sat at the table, hunched over a mug, his eyes glued to the floor. He didn't look up when I walked in, just took a long sip and muttered, "Morning." I grabbed a plate, keeping it casual. "Hey, Mom, Dad." She smiled, oblivious. "Sleep okay, Kate?" I nodded. "Yeah, fine." Breakfast was weird. Mom chattered about hitting the farmer's market later, her voice bright and bouncy. Tom barely said a word, just poked at his eggs like they'd offended him. I caught his eye once and he flinched. Quick, subtle, but I saw it. Last night was a ghost sitting right there with us, and we both knew it. I could have brought it up, teased him a little, but nah, too risky with Mom around. Instead, I shoveled food in my mouth and let her ramble about fresh tomatoes and homemade jam. "We should all go," she said, grinning. Tom grunted. "Maybe." I leaned back in my chair watching him. He looked rough, bags under his eyes, hair a mess, like he hadn't slept a wink. Guilt, probably, or embarrassment. I didn't feel bad for him, though. Not really. He'd walked into my room, started this whole mess, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen. The guy behind the gruff dad mask. The one who laughed about lake trips, who softened up when he thought I was Mom. It wasn't the Tom I grew up with, the one who'd yell if I left the garage light on. This Tom had layers, and I'd peeled one back whether I meant to or not. "You're quiet today," Mom said, nudging him with her elbow. He forced a smile. "Just tired. Long week." She bought it, patting his hand. "You work too hard." I smirked into my coffee. If she only knew. But she didn't, and she wouldn't. Not from me. This was our little secret, mine and Tom's, and it hung between us like a live wire. I wondered if he'd ever bring it up later, maybe when Mom wasn't around. Doubt it. He'd probably bury it deep and hope I'd forget. Thing is, I couldn't. It wasn't just the awkwardness. It was what I'd learned. Tom wasn't some cartoon dad, all rules and beer cans. He was a guy who carried stress, who lit up talking about the past, who didn't even realize how much he let slip when his guard was down. I'd always pegged him as simple. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Now I saw the cracks. The way he slumped when he talked about the crew, the way his voice caught when he said Mom was enough. It stuck with me, like a song I couldn't unhear. "Kate, you in for the market?" Mom asked, snapping me out of it. I shrugged. "Sure, why not?" Tom glanced up, just for a second, and I caught this flicker in his eyes. Relief, maybe? Like he thought I'd spill everything over bacon. I wouldn't. Not my style. But it made me think, what else didn't I know about him? About them? This whole night had flipped a switch, and now I was looking at my parents like they were strangers I'd just met. We finished eating and Mom started clearing plates, still humming. Tom stood, slow and stiff, and grabbed his keys. "Gonna check the truck," he said, heading for the garage. I watched him go, wondering if he'd ever look at me the same. Probably not. I mean, how could he? I'd seen him raw, unguarded, and he knew it. It wasn't power I had over him, it was understanding. And that felt bigger than any prank. I helped Mom with the dishes, my mind still spinning. "He's been off lately," she said, scrubbing a pan. "Work's getting to him." I nodded. "Yeah, he mentioned that." She smiled, soft. "He's lucky to have us." I laughed under my breath. "Guess so." But I couldn't stop replaying last night. The way he'd softened, the way I'd pushed it. Was it wrong? Maybe. I'd let him ramble, played along, but I didn't hurt anyone. It was just a moment. A weird, messy, real moment that showed me families more than what you see every day. If you loved this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, drop a comment, and pass it along to your buddies.
This is an artistic and fictional creation intended for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. Some scenes and dialogues in the video are part of a dramatized performance and incorporate elements of grotesque, satire, and exaggeration. The creator stands against discrimination, violence, and hatred. This channel fully complies with YouTube's policies and does not infringe upon copyright laws.